Let's see how we're going here.
The Uluru Statement from the Heart was being handled with delicate care in Sydney last night. It was about to become the first inanimate object to be awarded the Sydney Peace Prize.
To the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
But the Uluru Statement from the Heart has not always been treated with such respect in the 4 years since it was finalised.
The tension was high. There was a lot to debate and a lot of passion. And we came together on the third and final morning and endorsed it with standing acclamation.
We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution.
The significance of what happened at Uluru should never be underestimated.
For white Australia, it's unclear if that significance has really been fully appreciated, particularly after it was dismissed.
It's a gift. It's a gift of healing and indeed a gift of love. And we very mindfully decided that we would give it as a gift to the Australian people, not to the government, not to the Prime Minister.
Every other statement and petition was written to a king or a queen or a parliament. That's one lesson. What's happened to all of our previous voices is the other lesson that's in there.
Ensuring this voice, this plea to be heard, survives for the long term is what drove the process that led to the Uluru Statement, a process run by the Indigenous community itself through 13 regional dialogues which thrashed out a position of perhaps unprecedented unity.
The cultural authority that has underpinned this has been elders in our community, has been traditional owners. This has not been a government agenda at all. That's why, at each turn, in particular, when the Uluru Statement was issued to the Australian people, politicians dismissed it.
Another chamber in politics, or another something that sort of sits beside or above the Senate, that idea just won't fly.
Yes, well, how ungenerous. It did do a lot of damage, I think, to the campaign. Barnaby Joyce apologised for it, but it was taken up by everybody, including the Prime Minister of the day. He just stopped it there and then, but history will deal with Malcolm Turnbull.
Well, I think there's been enormous damage done to the Uluru Statement because it was called a third chamber, and that has set the cause back. This was about consulting Indigenous people on laws and policies which affect them.
Andrew Bragg is a Liberal senator from New South Wales who has just written a book which supports the case for the voice, arguing it reflects Liberal traditions, and he's optimistic of progress. However, in the face of the Joyce intervention and the Turnbull intransigence, those pushing the case for the voice have been running a grassroots campaign to win support.
I travelled the country taking the statement, the sacred canvas, to the people. First place I went to was the Gurindji people, where the Wave Hill Walk-Off happened in 1966, and famously received some land back from Gough Whitlam, the handful of sand. And I was conscious of not talking just to the converted, preaching to the converted, but trying to reach people from across the political spectrum. People absolutely endorse it.
Governments of whatever persuasion have always known better what's best for us, like we're children who have to be minded and looked after. Well, those days are gone, and we were never in that position anyhow.
The Morrison government says it is committed to a referendum on constitutional recognition when a consensus is reached and it has the best chance of success. It's a commitment that, like ones made back as far as John Howard in 2007, has already been pushed back. The Minister for Indigenous Australians expects the final report on the co-design of how the voice would actually work very soon. But the government has indicated two preferences already that are causing consternation.
If we do settle for the current process, which is limited to a voice to government, which is distinctly different from a voice to Parliament, we are settling with the status quo. And the one thing that we can't risk as First Nations peoples is to settle for the status quo, because the status quo is literally killing us.
Secondly, the government has indicated a preference to establish the voice through normal legislation, not through the Constitution, at least at first.
I would like to think that the government could develop a policy position which embedded a requirement to consult Indigenous people in the Constitution, with a referendum to be held next term, and then a voice to be legislated, thereby maintaining parliamentary supremacy, which is important to constitutional conservatives like me.
No, that's not to happen. You guys have been consulting us for generations. That's the whole point. We don't want to be consulted anymore. We're consulted to death. Nobody's talking about a legislative voice except the government.
The specific wording of the new clause in the Constitution will need to be a delicate balance. Advocates recognise the entire thing can't be defined there, but want language firm enough to survive the whims of future governments.
The constitutional amendment would be fairly minimal. You can't have all of the detail of the voice. We cannot risk not enshrining a representative body in this.
The Uluru Statement was not just about a constitutionally embedded voice to Parliament. It also sought commitments to truth-telling and treaty-making. The statement calls it a Makarrata Commission, which means a coming together after a struggle, in contrast to the idea of reconciliation between friends, a recognition that there never was any form of treaty between Indigenous people and later arrivals. Advocates say that important work at the federal level on treaties and truth-telling should not commence without the voice in place.
What's the point of truth without power in our communities? What's the point of treaties if you're not going to honour them and be accountable to them?
Marcus Stewart is the co-chair of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, which has been instrumental in establishing treaty and truth-telling bodies at a state level.
We called on a truth and justice process because our community were very clear, without truth there can't be treaty. And we worked with the government on co-designing a terms of reference.
The truth doesn't change things alone, political power does for the people most affected by that truth.
We are relying, as we did in 67, we asked you to help us and you did. 54 years later, we're seeking your assistance because we can't do this ourselves. We can't. We just don't have the numbers. We need you to help us.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.